Hello everyone, I'm Holoshideim with more Trigon Space Story. This video is part of a short series that explores different aspects of the game. The previous one was about the crew and their specializations, while this one will be about the weapons. The weapons module is what allows us to install weapons to the ship. Each weapon requires a certain amount of reactor in order to be powered, and upgrading our weapons module can increase the reactor that we can allocate to our weapons. Most ships can play up to 4 weapons, but an upgraded weapons module allows us to play stronger ones as well. Weapons that require less reactor are usually more valuable early in the run, since we can play many of them. Also, if we end up taking damage in our weapons module, they won't disable our entire offense and some of them will stay online. Cheaper weapons are also easier to replace as we transition into stronger and more expensive weapons once we upgrade our weapons module. Besides its reactor cost, another important aspect of a weapon is its reloading time. Slower weapons deal more damage, and as long as they're fully charged before jumping to a new beacon, they will be ready to fire at the start of each fight. However, faster weapons tend to get more value during longer fights. Thanks to the shorter reload time, they will be able to fire more often, and eventually outperform some of the slowest weapons. When playing multiple weapons, attempting to match their reloading speed is also something that we want to take into account. If we have only fast weapons, we can easily keep them in auto-fire to maximize our damage. However, if one of them is slower, it's often better to delay the faster one so that we're firing them at the same time. We end up losing some efficiency from the faster weapons, but we want to make sure that the enemies are not recharging their shields in between our shots. For this reason, it's also better to pair slower weapons together, even if they're usually more expensive. Weapons can damage different parts of the ship, and some of them will be more effective than others against specific targets. Each weapon has different damage values for hitting shields, the hull, the systems, or the crew. Some weapons are quite balanced and they deal a moderate damage to everything. Others, instead, can be more effective at damaging specific targets, but quite worse at the others. Using different kinds of weapons to compensate for potential weaknesses is often a good way to take advantage of these differences. Most weapons are intercepted by the shields, therefore, getting weapons that deal more damage against shields is often a priority. After that, system damage is usually the most valuable one. As long as we're neutralizing critical systems like the enemy weapons module, it doesn't matter if destroying the ship takes a bit longer. Direct hull damage is also good, but usually not as important unless we have powerful weapons that can quickly destroy enemy ships. Crew damage, instead, is often not that valuable. Killing enemy crew exclusively with weapons, while also making sure that the enemy ship is not a threat for us, is very unreliable. It's a viable strategy, but it's very problematic to execute against stronger ships, while we might end up destroying the weaker ones before we can kill the crew. It's a bit easier if we play weapons that deal low hull damage, or if the enemies have Terticons or Rakis, since they're either very fragile or slow at repairing damaged systems. Trigon has different types of weapons. Plasma weapons fire a certain amount of projectiles depending on the weapon. These projectiles are intercepted by the shields, and they won't be able to damage the hull, the systems, or the crew until they are depleted. For plasma weapons, having higher shield damage is often more important since we want to make sure that we can bring them down. Most plasma weapons fire their shots in a rapid succession, and the recharge time will start once all of them have been fired. This makes the overall reload speed of these weapons a bit longer than what's displayed, so it's something that we want to take into account when comparing weapons. Nonetheless, plasma weapons that fire multiple shots are usually better than the ones that fire just a single shot. Their overall damage is often higher, they're not countered by defense drones, and we are not relying too much on hitting that single shot, wasting our entire volley in case it misses. Certain plasma weapons cover a wide area instead of a single room. This makes targeting a specific system a bit less reliable, but they fire all the shots at the same time, so we're not delaying the reload time. Lasers can be positioned along the enemy ship in order to hit multiple rooms, or even the same room multiple times, since they deal damage for each tile the laser goes through. Most lasers are usually very ineffective against shields, but their damage output against hull or system is usually quite high. For this reason, they're usually paired with other weapons that can remove shields more effectively. Lasers have a different length depending on the weapon, and longer lasers can hit more rooms, dealing more damage. However, lasers with a shorter length are often faster, allowing us to deal more damage in selected areas of the ship, like their weapons or shields. Missile launchers are weapons that won't do anything by themselves, but they allow us to fire missiles. Missiles are consumable resources with their own specific stats. Some of them are quite weak and common, suitable for the earlier stages of the game. Others instead are considerably stronger, but they're rare and expensive. The missile launchers will require a different amount of reactor to be installed, just like regular weapons, and they will affect the recharge speed of the missiles. Overall, missiles are very strong weapons. They pierce shields, dealing damage directly to the ship and its systems, but managing them can be very expensive. Usually, relying exclusively on missiles is not ideal, since we risk ending up with no ammo. However, they're great support weapons for boarding ships. We can fire just a few missiles to disable enemy weapons, then let our boarders deal with the crew. Bomb teleporters work in a similar way to missile launchers. However, instead of traveling towards the enemy ship, bombs are teleported inside the targeted room, so they cannot be intercepted by defense drones. Compared to missiles, certain bombs won't deal any hull damage, making them even better as a support weapon for our boarders. EMP weapons fire large projectiles that deal massive damage to the shields. Once the shields are down, a portion of the system hit by the EMP will be temporarily disabled. The EMP damage can stack with itself, and it can even shut down entire systems for a long time. EMP weapons are not particularly valuable by themselves, since we need other ways to deal actual damage, but they can be a very strong support for other weapons or even drones. Beside the regular damage, some weapons will also have other secondary effects. Penetration will give weapons a chance to cause breaches. They will drain oxygen from the room, and they're good for killing enemy crew or simply delay the repairs. Fire chance is even better. The fire will deal damage to both crew and the system, making it quite dangerous if the enemies won't deal with it soon enough. As long as the enemy ship has enough hull, it's a very good way to get crew kills, but in general it's just a nice secondary source of damage. Certain weapons can have EMP damage as a secondary effect, gaining additional utility beside their normal damage. Trigon weapons also have a rarity. Some weapons are quite similar, but depending on their rarity, they get progressively more effective. Common weapons are the baseline for all types of weapons. They're weaker and easy to find, but still reliable for the earlier part of the game. Rare weapons are a bit stronger. Most of them either deal more damage, reload faster, or fire more shots. Very rare weapons are even stronger. Usually, finding one of these weapons will drastically increase our offense, since they have the strength of multiple weaker weapons. Phenomenal weapons instead are somewhat special, unique weapons. They're not necessarily better than very rare weapons, but some of them are quite different than regular weapons. For example, this phenomenal plasma weapon has a very short reload speed, and it can fire many projectiles over a few seconds. This missile launcher instead shoots 2 missiles at the same time. Weapons also have different firing modes. Each weapon can be fired normally by simply using its respective hotkey and targeting an enemy room whenever the weapon is fully charged. Firing weapons manually is often better for the slower weapons, especially if they consume bombs or missiles. Manual fire is also better in case one of our weapons is not particularly good against shields. In this case, we want to avoid the auto-fire to make sure that we are not wasting our shots against the shields, and fire only once they have been disabled by other weapons. If we toggle the auto-fire, the weapon will keep firing at the targeted room whenever it's ready, so we don't have to reposition it again. Auto-fire is great for EMP weapons and every plasma weapon that deals a good amount of damage to the shields. Also, if we have a weapon that fires multiple projectiles, we can use the burst mode to target different rooms with each of them. Utilizing the burst mode is very situational. In most circumstances, we want to focus the enemy weapons or shields, making the burst mode not as important, but it's an additional tool that we have at our disposal. That's it for this video about the weapons and the different types. Subscribe to this channel to stay updated about Trigon. You can find the links to get the game in the Epic and Steam stores in the description. And you can find me at twitch.tv/Holoshideim.